Hello, everyone. It's Jennie and Laurie of Astropath, and we are here today to talk about the Taurus Full Moon, which happens on November 15th, 2024 at 4:28 a.m. in Eastern Time. So that's the focus of our topic today. And before we get into that, I just want to encourage all of you to check out the other things that Jennie and I do out here in the world. You can visit her at hiddenpathastrology.com, and you can find me at lauriefarrington.com. Please go visit my brand new website. And let's see, what else do we want to touch on? Underneath this video in the show notes, you'll find all the other places that you can find us, all the other information about all of what we are up to. Is there anything that you want to directly talk about around that, Jennie?
Nope.
Okay.
Nerves are not. I have a class schedule I'm rolling out, but it's not up yet, and I will have already done my two classes by the time you see this video. So,
Okay.
yeah,
By the time you see this video, we're going to be in a really different place than where we are right now as we're talking about it, aren't we, Jenny?
sure are. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
going to be after the U.S. election, and who knows if we'll actually have the results by the date of this? Who knows? But anyway, it's hard. It's hard not to look at this chart that we'll discuss in a minute and bring that all up, as you shall see.
Yeah, we always try so hard to keep things on a personal level of natal astrology, but there are times that all of the things that are going on in the world are so clear in the
Yeah.
charts. So,
Yeah.
without further, let's talk about that new moon. Do you want me to
Yeah.
open
Well,
the chart or you
just
want to
have a
talk?
quick, before we do that, let's just mention that the Scorpio New Moon was on November 1st. So that was the new moon for this full moon, our Taurus full moon. And also, if you'd like to use the longer cycles, May 7th was the new moon in Taurus. So that would be the starting point of where this is now. So this is the culmination at the Taurus full moon of both of those cycles. And I guess we should talk a little bit about Taurus, just and what does it mean to have a full moon in Taurus, which is, of course, the topic of the whole video. But Taurus is the stable earth sign. It is the fixed sign. It is very focused on grounding. It likes things to stay the same. It likes to maintain. It doesn't like a whole lot of change, and it does not like its feathers to be ruffled. So, what do you have to add about Taurus? I mean, there's a lot, but
Well, it's just interesting because Taurus does, that whole idea of Taurus wants to get things the way it wants them, the way it thinks is the proper way to have them, and then hold it steady. And anyone with a strong focus in Taurus in their own natal chart has been really confronted with the need for change over the past since Uranus entered there in what year was that? 2018. So
mhm.
since 2018, the whole energy of Taurus has been kind of shaken up a
Mm.
lot. And that's a big piece of what this particular full moon is focusing our attention on is actually the
Yeah.
change, which, yeah,
Yeah.
Taurus doesn't want change. The fixed earth sign, it just wants things to stay the same.
Yeah. And so in mundane astrology, which is kind of what these videos are, I mean, they are, they're speaking about the mundane cycles of astrology, but you can think about Taurus as describing our resources, food, or money, like do we mine for resources, like just how we take resources out of the earth and what we do with those and what tangible products we make from all those things. On a slightly less tangible matter, it also does have something to do with money and the way money moves in the world. So having Uranus in Taurus since 2018 is really a mirror of all the things that have changed in the way that, food is grown and distributed throughout the world, the different things in money, including, from my point of view, weird things like
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. um, just all the different shifts and changes that we've had in those very tangible earthy realms
And also
that
women.
Taurus represents. Yep.
Also, issues around women, because that's very much a Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus.
Mhm.
So all of the Venusian things, there's been a lot of shakeup around.
Mhm. Yeah, and women's bodies. I mean, it's an earth sign, so we're definitely talking about bodies. So it definitely brings in all of that, which is a huge part of the election that's happening right now. So yeah, all of those topics are really at the top of our mind. And on a more personal level, I think Taurus speaks to there's a spectrum for Taurus. And on one end, when Taurus is out of balance, it digs its heels in and it can be very stubborn. It can also be complacent and really just try to hold things together in a way that ultimately is overly possessive and controlling. And so that's kind of when it's out of balance. In a more balanced state, Taurus is really speaks about the incredible processes and balance of Mother Earth. You
Mhm.
know, just the way that we have this balance and what equilibrium means. And it's not a state that just hangs out. It's something you have to move towards constantly to work with equilibrium. But anyway, like on a personal level, that can really bring in this idea of being comfortable with stillness and a sense of reverence. That's one of my favorite sort of keywords for the most, the highest state of Taurus is that state of reverence and the desire for real peace, like a real balance and, grounded feeling of peace. So,
The senses, all of the senses.
mhm.
I
Mhm.
always think of, I think it was in Stephen Forrest's first book, the what's the name of it?
The inner
Inner Sky,
sky.
the Inner
Yeah.
Sky. I remember, and that's where the first time I really identified the word reverence with Taurus was he talks about biting into an apple and just the reverence for all of our senses. And I love thinking about that. Taurus is really, yeah, it's a beautiful sign if used properly. And yeah, and over these past years, there's been a lot of shakeup there. So
Yeah.
are we ready to open the
Okay.
chart?
Yeah, let's put the chart up.
Okay. Here's the chart of the moment. And there's a lot going
Yeah.
on, isn't there?
Yeah, and it bears remembering that with these full moon videos, these really are just a moment in time and looking at a snapshot in time and what is popping up. And yes, there's a rather loud message in this chart. Is
Yeah.
the moon is very tightly conjunct Uranus, which is what we've just been mentioning about all the shakeups and the earthquakes and the changes that have happened in the realm of Taurus with Uranus there. So this full moon is really just bringing that change front and center. What has changed and shifted since 2018 in our world and for you personally? I mean, that's really the ultimately the question that is being posed here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of the way I think about this is that in this moment, we each need to look at where that Taurus is in our own lives and search for or try to create stability in the face of the upheaval that's happening in that area.
Yeah, it's kind of has a simple message in a lot of ways. And there's some other layers to that message, which is there's something in this chart that is just saying you've got to accept change. You got to accept the changes that have happened. Fighting them is not helpful. So there's some message about, yeah, just getting clear with yourself. What does it mean for you to have inner stability, no matter how much is changing outside? Like, what does that mean? Yeah,
Yeah, and then when we look at the aspects that are going on with this full moon, it's really, it's impossible for us not to look at the bigger picture of the outer culture, what's happening in the world, because it is the outer planets that are so closely tied into this full moon. We have a trine to Pluto. We have a sextile to Neptune, which has a sextile to Pluto. So these are the planets that are involved in what we're looking at here. And
Mhm.
those are all the outer planets that are not personal. They are about the bigger picture of what's happening with the planet and the cultures, etc.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we are talking about a trine and a sextile to the moon, as well as a conjunction to Uranus. So,
Right.
those are what's considered to be the soft aspects, at least the sextile and the trine are, meaning they are, potentially easier to handle or offer a gift or offer a new opportunity should you be willing to take it. But I sort of read this, I still agree with those things, but it's also just like, just looking out at what is happening in the culture is sort of what this is saying. Like you can see having a connection to these three outer planets that really represent, generations, that represent transpersonal issues, that represents changes that you can see in the culture, and just having a clear influx of whatever's happening and coming into you personally as an individual and working with it. So there's a lot of about that and just about how do you handle that? How do you handle what you see?
Yeah.
And what you're experiencing.
Yeah, how is the bigger picture of the culture impacting your ability to maintain your own stability in the face of all the changes? And yeah, it's soft aspects. There is an opportunity for you to really find that stability.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, and also it's funny just kind of throwing out this word change. It's like, ooh, the boogeyman of change. But there's all these quotes about like, the only inevitable thing in life is change. And so it's not that it's necessarily bad, it's more just inevitable. Like this is part of the unfolding. There's an evolutionary aspect of an unfolding. There's growth, there's development, there's a flow to the way things unpack. Like no moment can ever be duplicated. I mean, every moment is totally unique. And so, what I like about doing these full moon videos is just that it is speaking to this moment in time, this unique moment in time, never to be duplicated, and what is showing up. And there you can bring in your kind of reverence of Taurus,
Yeah.
of really recognizing that and trying to tap into the reverence capability of
Oh,
Taurus.
I love how you brought that in. Yeah. And one of the things that Jenny realized as we were looking at this is that this aspect between Uranus and Pluto is the final aspect before Pluto steps into Aquarius. So
Mm.
this is really it's tying up, it's wrapping up that process of Pluto's entire going through Capricorn since 2008. This is the last statement about it. And it's a trine.
Mhm.
It's a gift of change.
Yeah.
I like that. I like
Yeah,
that.
it's kind of crazy. So Pluto's going to go into Aquarius on November 19th. So we're just a
Right.
few
So
days
a
out.
few days
This
after.
is, yeah, and this is quite literally the very last contact it has is to the moon. This final trine to the moon is the final thing that's happening that before Pluto goes into Aquarius, and it's at a full moon. I mean, I think that's it's a little bit after the full moon, but close enough.
Yeah.
I think that is such a statement. There's a story there. I mean, there's a story about what you just said, Lori, the gift of the transformation that must happen. Like there's a lot of things that do need to shift. There's a lot of ways that we're handling our resources that very much need to shift. And the way that things are moving and shaking and the weather around us and the climate around us is letting us know that, as part of that.
And I
So
think, if you're listening to this and you have not listened to the video that we did about Scorpio season, I'd really encourage you to go back and watch that video. We talked a lot in the Scorpio season video about the movement of Pluto into Aquarius and how that's going to impact us on an individual level determined by our rising sign. And that, along with this, as yeah, along with this is going to give you a lot more information as well.
yeah, and just to talk briefly about, it is Scorpio season. So, during this Taurus full moon and the few weeks before it, you really have your attention focused where those Scorpio issues are taking place. And, it's kind of interesting to think about the two together because Scorpio kind of has something to say about what you need to shed, what you need to release, what you need to get rid of that you don't need anymore. And Taurus brings in the other side of that equation of like, what do you need to hang on to? What do you need to
Bill.
accumulate? Yeah, what do you need to build and hold on to? So that's the great balance thing that happens at every full moon is just really inviting you to look at the polarity. And in this case, is asking you what do you need to hold on to for your own inner stability, while all these other things are shifting and changing, and during this pretty intense Scorpio season. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
That's interesting. I just feel compelled before we move on to also draw the line here and there to show the full picture. Isn't that
Yeah,
lovely? That's interesting. Okay, are we ready to move to the individual pieces? Or is
I
there
think so.
more? Okay,
I mean, there's always more, but
absolutely.
I
There
think
is
we
always
can.
more. Okay, so let's move on and talk about folks who have Aries rising.
Okay, so those of you with Aries rising, this Taurus full moon is going to land in your second house. The second house is the house of your values, your resources. It might be the way you earn money. It certainly has a relationship to money, your financial situation. And, we always talk a lot about there being at the core of all those things, this relationship to yourself. How do you value yourself? So those are some of the topics that may well come to light during this full moon. It's very important to consider, what changes have you been through that have to do with the way you value yourself and then your resources and your possessions that has gone on in a longer process since 2018. What are those bigger shifts that Uranus is bringing in at this full moon that you can really see clearly into because the full moon is bright. It lets you see that. And this is happening during Scorpio season. So most of the things that are happening for you during this time period are things that get stirred up around other people's baggage, other people's values, where Scorpio is in the eighth house for you. So those things are letting you kind of see, what pieces do you need to let go of, what things do you need to shed so that you can really work with how do you maintain your own inner stability and really have a sense of reverence for that connection between you and in your worth, like really holding that is a very important key to your stability.
Mm.
So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, so you're trying to create, I mean, in this moment, the moment of this full moon, you are seeing how you can create this stability in the face of disruption. And really keeping in mind that this is so closely attached to Pluto's movement into your 11th house. So there's, as you're stabilizing your finances or your self-worth, it's really also supporting that bigger change coming in how you welcome in community members or some sort of new community or changes in community.
Nice.
Okay,
Great.
so we're going to go on to folks who have Taurus rising. So for you with Taurus rising, the full moon, this moment in time, your attention is in the first house. This is, the first house is really the simplest house because it's about you. It's about your personality. It's about who you are when you step out the door and encounter other people. This is the most personal house. Um, you know, People with Taurus rising, just there's such a need to be stable, solid, part of the earth. You kind of can recognize those people when you meet them. There's that stability about them. And over the past year, since 2018, there's been a lot of disruption in how you present yourself or how you are perceived. And in this moment of this full moon, you want to really be finding that stable place to hold on to, a stability in who you are as these changes are still in process. Uranus will move out of there sometime next year, but you're finding your footing here at this full moon. There's an opportunity to find your footing in relation and in reaction to a partner, a partnership, something going on in your more intimate partnerships. There's some way in which you are, I don't know, releasing something in how you respond to your relationships in order to truly stabilize yourself.
Mm, nice.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, some of the other things we talked about in the beginning was the fact that this is the final lunation right before Pluto finally moves into Aquarius for good. So there's some process that about the development of your higher wisdom, your worldview that you can now leave behind,
Mm.
that you can now step forwards into a new place as Pluto goes into your 10th house of your profession. So part of the picture here is the stability with which you need to work with at this Taurus full moon is in preparation for something really new and different happening in your professional life.
Mm.
So this, the way that you can kind of, I don't know, really hold on to the positive parts of the Taurus piece here, of finding your own internal ground, of finding an unshakable sense, connection with yourself is ultimately what this is about, is going to help you really serve you during this much bigger shift that's happening. So that's also part of this picture, and there's a great opportunity there, really. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to folks who have Gemini rising.
Okay, so those of you with Gemini rising, this full moon in Taurus is landing in your 12th house. The 12th house, I always have to say this first, it's the most hidden house. It's really speaking to something that's almost behind you, like you just can't quite see it. So for that reason, we use it to describe your subconscious processes, and also perhaps your view on spirituality, what you think of the kind of how you connect to the collective. The 12th house also has something to say about how you handle suffering. Suffering is just something that everybody as a human being has to go through at one time or another. So there's something big in the way that you have changed, the way that you handle this suffering or struggle, or the way you handle your subconscious processes. There's something big here. There's something you've really woken up to. One of the important things about all of that is that you are able to develop compassion through others, to others for this during mixing up my prepositions there. But one of the things is about the development of compassion for others, and that is something that you
Mm.
may have awakened to some whole new way of doing that. So that's kind of the heart of the Taurus full moon and the light it's shining on a longer process. And also, this is Scorpio season. So Scorpio season really invites you to please look at your practices, the way you manage your intensity, what you need to release through your daily routines, so your exercise habits, the way that you eat, all of those things are very important for your health. And the Taurus full moon kind of lets you get a glimpse into, well, how does all that support your mental health as well? So, yeah.
That's great. The only thing I want to add is we talked about in the beginning of this video that this is the final lunation before Pluto actually moves permanently for the next many, many years into Aquarius. So this is really kind of a last moment that is leading into this big change getting ready to occur in your worldview. So, there's some way in which you are seeking that stability, that inner, in your unconscious, in your spiritual nature, whatever it is, behind the scenes, there is a way in which there's been a lot of change, a lot of upheaval in your understanding of yourself there. At this moment of this full moon, you're looking for the stability there. That stability, as you find that stability, it's going to really support the growth of what's coming next in this new way of seeing the world, the bigger world picture for you.
Yeah. Yeah, something here about maybe things haven't been so easy because the sixth and the 12th house aren't the easiest, but that you're really becoming more wise ultimately. Yeah.
Huh, that's interesting. Since both of our partners have Gemini rising, I hope they both become more wise.
Me too.
Okay,
They are. They're
they are.
both already wise.
We're going to move on to folks with Cancer rising. So, if you have Cancer rising, this full moon is landing in your 11th house. The 11th house really relates to community. I think of it as, you know, like-minded people that support you to your desires. Back in the day, the 11th house was always thought of as the house of hopes and dreams and wishes. It's kind of funny to think about that now. People don't think of the 11th house that way so much anymore. But I think it's really, it's the community that supports you to those things. We need community to reach where we're going. Okay. So this really highlights community for you. And because we are in the middle of Scorpio season, this, we've been going through this process of really focusing on how we give of ourselves. The polarity between the fifth and the 11th actually is one of my favorites. You can think of the fifth house as where you give love through your creativity or children, love affairs, risk taking, all of those things. So you've kind of been really focused on that. But in this moment of this full moon, your focus goes on finding a way to use that area, to use your ability to give of yourself to find stability in the community that supports you. Since 2018, as Uranus has been moving through that 11th house for you with Cancer rising, this has been an area where even though you want it to be so stable, there's been a lot of change, a lot of upheaval in this area. So at this full moon, what you're really looking for is to find that stability even in the face of what may feel like there's a lot of upheaval. So, finding that sense of reverence in your community, really the appreciation of how you are supported by others. I think that's a real place to be looking for that stable moment.
Yeah, I think this is interesting too. I was thinking if, Scorpio is the place where you also need to, release something, you need to kind of be able to shed. So there's something about, releasing into your creative processes is something that will help you know, what to hold on to find community or to continue working with community. There's something about that that popped in my mind there. But the other piece that we, are introducing here too is just that idea that the moon is making this trine to Pluto, and it's the very last thing that happens before Pluto goes into Aquarius for good. So there's something here preparing you for how do you want to handle other people's issues, other people's intense emotional stuff, other people's attachments to money, other people's struggles around, their own kind of shadow and whether or not, how much shadow work they've done. That piece is coming into play as Pluto moves into Aquarius and moves into your eighth house, and so your ability to work with this Taurus full moon, and it kind of is giving you a little inroad into how do you want to set boundaries with other people? Like who do you want to open the door to through community? That's going to help support you, and where do you need to say no thank you, and kind of move on and set a new boundary. So it very much supports this Taurus full moon, and it's really giving you a little glimpse into that, like how do you stabilize in community, and it'll help provide you with these other skills that you need.
Hmm,
So
interesting.
yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to folks with Leo rising.
Okay, so those of you with Leo rising, you happen to have Taurus in your 10th house of your social reputation and your profession. So this is the place where you think about how you want to contribute to society one way or another. And so this Taurus full moon is really bringing to light everything that has changed about this part of your life, certainly in recent times, but in time since 2018, really, when Uranus moved into Taurus, there's been a lot of change in the way that you're handling this part of your life. So reflect on that, and particularly reflect on how stable you feel and how stable you want to feel through this part of your life. Like, how can you find that internal ground where you're trusting yourself to be working with, what you want to achieve that will have an impact on society? And certainly with Uranus there, yeah, you've probably seen a lot of things move and shake down in the past few years. But this is also against the backdrop of it being Scorpio season, where your attention has been directed down to the very roots of your personality, to your home life, your family life, maybe to issues that have to do with your lineage. I mean, having Scorpio there in the fourth house where the sun is being, that's a deep scrutiny of, your emotional origins. And that includes the wounds you may have received through your lineage. That may include other, yeah, just pretty intense emotions. So that's where Scorpio season has happened. And then this Taurus full moon is allowing you to kind of, get some balance and look at the polarity of what you would like to find for a greater sense of stability to do with your social reputation.
Hmm. Great. I like that. The only other thing that we want to bring in here that we talked about at the beginning of the video, in the first part of the video, was that this full moon is interesting in many ways, partly because it's so closely conjunct that Uranus, but also because it is forming a trine aspect to Pluto, and it is the final lunation before Pluto makes its final pass into Aquarius. So this really is like finding that place of stability in your career, finding where you can, even in the face of upheaval, finding that space of stability. That is really connected with the movement of Pluto. What you're going to really see is that you're probably very aware of it already, but you're really heading into this major change and transformation around your most significant and intimate partnerships. So finding this stability in career is going to really help support that process.
Hmm, nice. Yeah,
Is that everything we have?
I think so.
Okay, that's everything we
Makes
have.
sense.
Rising.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move on to folks who have Virgo rising. And this is putting this Taurus full moon up there in your ninth house. So the ninth house, this is where the focus is. The ninth house is the area that we think of as worldview. There's so many things. Astrology is a symbolic language, so there's always layers and layers of meaning to every piece and every part and every symbol involved. The ninth house, when we think of it as worldview, it includes all the ways that we develop our worldview. So it includes things like travel and education and even politics and religion and all the things and culture, different cultural understandings. So this is an area, those of you who have Virgo rising, you really want this area of worldview to be something solid and stable that you can count on. But over the past years, since 2018, when Uranus first moved in there, there's been a lot of upheaval and a lot of change around your worldview and your understanding of those bigger pictures of the world we live in. So, with this lunation so closely connected with that Uranus, there's a suggestion in here that we've been talking about around finding a stable point there in your worldview, finding what is stable and solid, even amongst all the change. And a full moon is just a moment in time. It's a moment in the middle of or in the midst of a particular season. The Taurus full moon is in the midst of the Scorpio season. So we have to really consider the polarity between those two houses. The sun, the Scorpio sun, has been moving through the third house, which is really bringing your attention to your how you use your voice, the integrity of your voice. And like Jennie said in the last one, I loved how you said this, Jennie. This is an area where throughout this Scorpio season, you need to really be embracing this deep scrutiny of how you use your voice and allowing that to support finding the stability in your worldview.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I like
Now,
that idea of just deep scrutiny. Wherever Scorpio is, we always need to be really deeply scrutinizing our integrity in that area.
yeah. Yeah, and it kind of brings in what I like about the polarity is just the whole thing with Scorpio where you got to learn how to let go. So you scrutinize so that you can let go. And then Taurus is more like, what inner stability do I need to hold on? But it's if Taurus is holding on too much, that's not so good. But in this case, we're really focusing on what's the usefulness, what's the support that you can bring to yourself in your worldview through that. So yeah, I like how those work together. And the other piece that we mentioned in the beginning of this is just that, the moon is about to have a trine with Pluto in this chart. And that's the very last thing that happens before Pluto goes into Aquarius, for a couple of decades. And so in the case of those of you with Virgo rising, Pluto's exiting that area of creativity and it's really moving into your sixth house, that has more to say about your practices, your lifestyle, your overall routines, and also something to say about how you take care of your health, and through all of those routines, how you manage yourself on a lot of levels. So, kind of adopting this broader worldview, where the Taurus full moon is, and kind of leaning into that stability is going to help you also navigate what changes are happening in the way that you handle your day-to-day life. Because that's a much slower, longer, bigger thing. And the idea that you're going to stabilize your own internal connection to your philosophy about life can be tremendously helpful, as things shift in your lifestyle and the way you handle all of those routines, your exercise and sleep and so on. So yeah,
Nice.
I don't think.
Okay, we're going to move on to folks who have Libra rising.
Okay, so those of you with Libra rising, this really brings in some of the the stickiness of the eighth house. That's where the Taurus full moon is landing for you. And I say stickiness because the eighth house has to do with things that are hidden from view. The hidden emotional issues of other people, their hidden attachments to money. It has to do with all the things that come up when you share resources with people. You start bumping into each other's stuff without even realizing it. It's like what's hidden in the small print when you sign a contract is kind of what the eighth house represents. So having the Taurus full moon here is really showing you how do you deal with other people's tumultuous stuff. And certainly having Uranus in this eighth house since 2018 has revealed a lot, has been a lot of change in the way you handle other people's issues. And so at this moment in time at the Taurus full moon, the question that's being asked of you is how do you set those boundaries that work for you, in order to maintain a sense of stability in the face of other people's baggage, other people's stuff that they're not dealing with. Um, the eighth house can also bring to mind secrets, skeletons in the closets, things like that. So sometimes what happens when you have, is you bump into other people's stuff, in their skeletons in the closet, and it leaves you reeling. So the question is kind of like, how do you handle that? How can you keep that stable sense? The other half of the equation is that we are in Scorpio season. This Taurus full moon is Scorpio season's full moon. So it's really illuminating the priority, or the polarity of how you value yourself. So that's going to be part of the equation. If you struggle with self-worth, it's harder to set boundaries in the face of other people's stuff. If you have, the more stable you can be, or the more you can kind of scrutinize what is impeding you, in the way you think about your self-worth, and let some of that go, the more you're going to be able to kind of establish this solid ground, that you need to in the eighth house. So they work really tightly together. So
Yeah, polarities are fascinating to look at. And that's one of the great things about the full moon is it puts us in this, we have to look at the polarity. That's the main thing going on. So the other thing that we wanted to talk about here, which is that this full moon is the final lunation and the final aspect that is made to Pluto as it is about to enter Aquarius, which it does, I think, 4 days after this full moon. So you want to think about the fact that you've already seen the writing on the wall. You already know that there's a huge, profound change getting ready to happen in your fifth house, which is about how you give of yourself, how you take risks, how you play, all those kind of things. And there's some way in which this lunation is really just set up to support that movement. I really like how this is playing out. You want to think that how you can stabilize that area, how you can stabilize the boundaries you set, how you can stabilize yourself in the face of changing dynamics of other people's values. How you can stabilize that is going to really help support this profound change that is coming in how you give of yourself creatively or with love, how you give love.
Nice.
So there's that. And now we're going to move on to folks who have Scorpio rising. Okay, so if you have Scorpio rising, this full moon falls in your seventh house. I always think this is such an interesting thing, people who have Scorpio rising and have Taurus in the seventh house. So this is really highlighting your intimate partnerships and how you, first house, how you personally are dealing with a partner. So the full moon is focusing there. There's been a great deal of change and upheaval in your most intimate partnerships, probably since 2018. As a Scorpio rising person, you really want stability and calm and beauty. You want relationship to be a certain package of stability. Since 2018, you have had to encounter a lot of change and upheaval in that area. At this full moon, there's really a way in which it's really important that you find a stable place in the middle of a partnership and focus on the development of that. Looking at the fact that this full moon is happening in the middle of Scorpio season, there's been a lot of focus on yourself and your own way of being in the world. This moment of the full moon kind of takes that and says, let's pay attention to what's going on and how we can create stability in the relationship itself.
Nice.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it sounds interesting, right? Between that polarity of self and other. It's like, how do you show up in the relationship? It's like that's such an important question. And there's almost like there's three people. There's like you, the other person, and then the entity of the relationship. So there's
Definitely.
a lot in this statement of first and seventh house. And then the other thing that we talked about is just the simple fact that this is the very last connection that the planet Pluto makes before it goes into Aquarius. And that connection is that there's a trine to this full moon not long after the moon is full. And so there's something here that is playing into this bigger story. As Pluto moves into Aquarius, it's moving out of your third house of communication and into your fourth house of family, home, and your internal home. And so there's some shifting that's happening in that home space. And the degree to which you can kind of carve out that inner stability for yourself within your partnership, in how you hold space for that partnership, is going to allow you to weather some shifts that are going to happen, these long, slow changes that are going to happen in your fourth house, and vice versa. It's like bringing a sense of reverence to your partnerships is also something that can help you handle or take your home life in the direction you want to go in. And also, you have to think about the fourth house as your own emotional foundation in this context, I think. So you really want to have your own connection with yourself as one of the foundational stones of your emotional foundation. So there's a connection between those two places. So hopefully that made some sort of sense. But
Yeah, I think that's really great to think about, finding that stability in the relationship and how much that will support the big changes at the core. That's
yeah.
really, I love that there's that trine aspect there. It's really beautiful. Okay, we're going to move on to folks with Sagittarius rising.
Right, so those of you with Sagittarius rising, this Taurus full moon is going to occur in your sixth house. The sixth house, in a way, it kind of covers a lot because it's really your day-to-day life, your daily routines, the what you do when you get up in the morning, what you eat, how you sleep, how you wind down before bed. Do you meditate? Should you meditate? All of those topics really are part of the sixth house. It also has something to say about the way that you work. I mean, this is all also connected to your work life, because you've got to have routines and a schedule in order to meet the demands of your work life. So all of those things are what comes to light at this full moon. And there's something about just, yeah, allowing yourself to feel really stabilized in these routines. Even though with Uranus there since 2018, you've probably seen quite a few changes in how you handle this part of your life. There might be changes in the way that you eat. There might be changes in the way that your body metabolizes things. There's a lot of different ways you can look at this, and certainly exercise impacts that as well. So there's a big thing you can kind of look at, and at this full moon, take stock of all that. Take a look, ask what has shifted since 2018. And then ask yourself how stable you feel. And is there a way for you to connect on a deeper level to your own internal stability that is unshakable, even if, routines shift and move? There's another thing with the sixth house is it can have to do with your health. So there's something about wanting to have this deep reverent connection with yourself that is somewhat unshakable in the face of these changes to health and routines. And meanwhile, we are in Scorpio season. Every full moon is part of a sun season through a sign. And so in this case, we're looking at the 12th house where Scorpio is for you. And during Scorpio season, it's really kind of stirred up some things in your deeper subconscious, like things that you may not be able to see so easily, and kind of brought the idea of, what do you need to shed for your greater health? And then that's what the Scorpio Sun is questioning you about. Is like what things would benefit you if you could let go of them? And then the Taurus full moon brings in the, okay, and then what do you need to hold on to have a sense of your own stability? Yeah.
Nice. Okay. The only thing I'm going to add is we talked at the beginning of this video about the fact that this full moon, one of the interesting things about this full moon is that it creates a trine aspect to Pluto just before Pluto moves into Aquarius, which it does 4 days after this full moon. So this lunation is really shining a light on that movement into Aquarius. So you want to think as you are looking for that stable point, what it is you're creating, what stability you're trying to create in your lifestyle, in your day-to-day routines, that stabilization is going to really support the movement of Pluto into the third house, which is, you can feel it now because Pluto's been doing a little dance and has dipped into Aquarius several times before this final movement in there. So you are aware that there are big changes on the horizon regarding third house issues. It could be stuff around your siblings, around your neighbors, around your neighborhood itself, or around your ability and needs and around communication. So it could be about how you use your voice, what you use your voice for. So as that change is really ramping up with this final movement of Pluto into Aquarius, just understanding that this lunation is helping to create the stability to make that passage a bit easier and more workable.
Mhm.
Huh.
Yeah, something in this about, if it is health issues or whatever, you got to talk about it. There's something about talking about. Maybe that's what's new is that maybe you haven't talked about things and now you need to, or maybe you've overshared and you want to do it differently. So I don't know, something about that popped in my
That's
mind.
interesting. I like
Yeah.
that you brought that up because that really feels that feels important. There is something that needs to something around your routines, around your health that needs to be talked about. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move then to folks who have Capricorn rising. If you have Capricorn rising, the full moon, the Taurus full moon is falling in your fifth house. The fifth house is, well, it's the fun house, really. It's the house that we think of when it comes to how we give of ourselves most authentically. It's the house that relates to our creativity, to our children, which are clearly a creative project if we have children, our love affairs. It also relates to issues around play, around risk taking. If you're skydiving, that's a fifth house activity. Um, People with Capricorn rising probably don't normally think of skydiving as a fun thing because they have Taurus in that house. They want stability, and there's a real desire for things to be very stable in that area. However, since 2018, there's been a lot of shakeup, and there you may have found yourself in a position where you've been, taking more risks than usual in terms of how you give of yourself, how your creative practices or projects, or, all of those things. Maybe you've been more inclined to take some risks.
Mm.
This full moon is really suggesting that you look for, in the midst of whatever instability might be in that area, you find a place that's stable and build on it at this full moon. The polarity brings us, the full moon is this point in the middle of Scorpio season. So we've got both sides of this polarity to look at. The Scorpio season has highlighted the opposite house, the 11th house, which is about where we receive rather than where we give. This is the area where we receive through community. And there's some way in which during this season and this full moon, there's really a need to be thinking about, really scrutinizing your own understanding of the communities that you are entwined with, and really making sure that you are holding the most integrity there. There's some ways of releasing some area of that in order to find the stability in the fifth house of your own creativity.
Mm.
I think I kind of said that weird, but I hope it made sense.
Well, what you were kind of, while you're talking, it started getting me thinking, well, sometimes the issue with Scorpio can be being a bit too obsessive, holding on too tightly. So part of that scrutiny might be, are there places that you're holding on too tightly to community that isn't really serving you or is actually, somewhat unconscious or could be, it could be a better use of your personal power, essentially. So it is a little bit like, yeah, what do you need to shed there, perhaps, that would sort of liberate you to know what to kind of hold on to into your creative processes. I don't know. There's something, but that keyword of obsessiveness that can happen with Scorpio,
Yeah.
and in groups particularly. So I don't know.
Yeah, and letting go.
Yeah.
I think one of
Yeah.
the important things with Scorpio is the issue of integrity too. So
Mhm.
if there's anything that's out of integrity, that's the thing you've got to let go of.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, that's an interesting piece. The other storyline that's going along with this picture is that the planet Pluto is about to move into Aquarius for good on November 19th. So just a few days after this, and the very last connection it makes with any planet, it happens to be pretty close to this full moon with the moon itself. So that's pretty cool, really interesting to think about. So it kind of plays into the story of at this full moon, as you're looking at what you need to stabilize, what connection with yourself do you need to stabilize in the way when you give of yourself to other people, there's some question being raised about where's that coming from? Like there's Pluto's moving into your house of self-worth. So there's a question here around, what might need to change in the way that you work with your own self-worth, that could be raised at this full moon. And so it's kind of giving you an opportunity to really think deeply about your own connection through the creative processes, while there might be some change in also your financial situation, or the way that you handle your resources and your possessions.
Mm.
So there it's working with that as well. So
Mm.
yeah.
Fascinating.
Mhm.
Okay, we're going to move on then to Aquarius rising.
Right. So those of you with Aquarius rising, this Taurus full moon is landing in your fourth house of home, family, lineage. So your ancestry can come into play. And it's really a moment in time to witness what kinds of changes have you gone through since 2018 that has to do with those topics. Have you moved? Have you discovered something new and fascinating about your genetics or your family ancestry? Do you have a different view of, what you call family? Is there something that has changed? So at this full moon, you're really getting a chance to review that. Look at all those big shifts. And the fourth house really is your foundation, your roots. So to have so much instability in your roots, it can be very difficult. So this Taurus full moon really gives you an opportunity to recognize what piece of your own internal stability can you maintain here. And you have proven to yourself that you can maintain a lot of upheaval, because that is what Uranus going through your fourth house suggests. So there's something here coming to light, and it really is asking you, what can you hold in reverence about your connection with yourself and your own emotional foundation, no matter where you live, no matter who you live with,
Mm.
and so on, that the fourth house represents. In the meantime, we are in Scorpio season. That means these past few weeks there's been a lot of focus on your 10th house of your social reputation and your profession. And maybe you've found yourself needing to scrutinize and dig in, to the things that you need to let go of that have to do with your professional reputation or your social reputation. There's, this could be a pretty good big identity shift that's going on, which, yeah, adds up with the rest of the picture here, which I'm now going to pass to Lori.
Yeah, there's definitely a big shift in your identity that is right on the horizon. 4 days after this full moon is when Pluto enters Aquarius for the final time after doing a dance back and forth for quite a while. The lunation itself, this full moon, makes the final aspect to Pluto before it goes in. So there's a real interplay of how these work together. This full moon really can support that movement of Pluto into your first house. So the way I would think about this is, as Jennie was talking about finding a place of reverence, finding a place of calm within your innermost depth of yourself, your home, your family, your ancestral line, finding something stable within that is going to truly and deeply support this big change. Pluto going into your first house is about as profound a shift as you will ever encounter in your life. So finding that little spot of stability as this change is going on. And, I don't want it to sound scary. Pluto going into your first house, the job of Pluto is to empower. This is the intention of this, is to empower your life, empower you in your life. So finding that little point of stability within your family or the core of you is really going to support that empowerment.
Nice.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I like that. People with Aquarius rising are really in a fascinating place in their lives. I
Mhm.
have a few clients with that, and it's fascinating to watch how it's playing out.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on now to folks with Pisces rising. If you have
Mhm.
Pisces rising, the full moon here is falling in your third house. The third house is the area of the chart that really speaks to our communication abilities, how we use our voice. And on the other side, it relates to the relationships in our lives, that the people that we don't really choose, but are vastly important in our lives, our siblings, our neighbors, our neighborhood itself. This house really is about our how our minds work and how we use our voice. So for
Mhm.
people with Pisces rising, this is an area where you really want stability. You want those stable relationships with those people in your life, the siblings, the neighbors, etc. You want that stability, and you want to be able to use your voice in a way that is strong and stable and clear. Well, since 2018, as Uranus has been moving through that area, there's been a lot of upheaval, and you may have, been through a lot of changes in those relationships and a lot of, like, yeah, just upheaval in how you use your voice, what you want to use your voice for. But at this point of this full moon, you want to really seek out a place of stability in the face of the instability. So because this is a full moon, it is happening in the middle of or in the midst of the Scorpio season. So we're looking at both sides of this polarity. Scorpio season has highlighted your ninth house. It has really highlighted the area of your worldview, how you understand the bigger world picture. There's a lot of, while the sun has been moving through there during Scorpio season, you really are kind of pushed to examine your own integrity in this area, where you may be out of integrity, and really paying attention to what needs to be released there. So how you are doing that at this full moon, you can really, kind of focus in on finding that stable point of using your voice or connecting with some of these people in your life.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting because I think one of the key skills for kind of handling the third house is to be kind of open-minded and kind of to allow, in order for learning to take place, you have to allow, open yourself to growth, which means you're probably going to have to shed some things to make room for new things, so it's kind of interesting. It's a very learning place. And meanwhile, we talked about the planet Pluto on November 19th is going into Aquarius, where it will be for the next couple of decades. I mean, this is the final moment. This is the final contact that Pluto makes with any planet, and it happens to be to this full moon in a nice trine. So there's this flow of information coming to you about how to kind of manage this ability to stay. It's like kind of ironic, like stay stable by being open to change. It's like a bridge, I mean, a bridge has to flex with earthquakes or collapse. So there's something very important for you as Pluto moves into your 12th house, the planet of your subconscious processes, the planet of forces the house of much, much larger forces than you, than just your individual self. So there's something that is a big change to have Pluto go kind of behind the scenes and be stirring things up from back there. It strikes me that this is a great time. I know we say this often, but this is a great time to make sure you've got those supports in place, like therapeutic supports. That could be a therapist, or the way that you know that you must retreat from time to time. Get out of your normal life and unplug. So I think that would be an important thing to think of. So keep that in mind. Like, how do you keep yourself refreshed and open and therefore stable to learning, in your life in general. So that's what this kind of brings up.
That's
It's interesting.
fascinating. I love thinking about Pluto moving into the 12th house. But, we've talked so much about Pluto's movement in many videos.
I know.
I just want to remind you, if you did not watch our Scorpio season video, I think that would give you a lot more understanding of that, because we talked a lot in that about Pluto's movement. So you might want to review that as well. But there we have it. I think we've been through all 12 signs. We did it, Jenny. And
Nice.
hmm,
Right. Thank you.
one on here. Here we go. Okay. So thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you everyone for
Thank
watching,
you.
and we'll see you all again.